The ship drifted through the darkness of space, its metal hull reflecting the distant light of a yellow star. Commander Hyun stood on the bridge, his three eyes focused on the blue planet that grew larger in the viewing screen. Earth. The word felt strange in his mind, a memory from 500,000 years ago when his ancestors had last visited this world. "All systems ready, Commander," said Captain Jiwon from her station. Her fingers moved quickly across the control panel, checking and rechecking their approach vectors. The Veltari were careful people. They had explored 1,000 worlds and they never took chances. Hyun nodded slowly. He had studied the old records before this mission. His people had come to this planet once before, so long ago that it seemed like ancient history. Back then, they had found primitive creatures living in caves, barely able to make fire. The creatures were called humans. They had walked on 2 legs and used simple stone tools. The Veltari had marked Earth as a low-priority world and moved on to more interesting places. "Sir, I'm getting strange readings," said Dr. Mirai from the science station. Her voice carried a note of confusion that made Hyun turn toward her. Mirai was the best scientist on the ship. She never sounded confused. "What kind of readings?" Hyun asked. Mirai's hands moved across her console, pulling up data streams that flooded the screen with information. Energy signatures. Massive ones. And there are structures in orbit around the planet. Lots of them. Jiwon stood up from her chair and walked closer to the main screen. "That's impossible. The last survey said this world had primitive life. Nothing technological. The last survey was 500,000 years ago," Mirai reminded them. "But still, this level of advancement shouldn't be possible. Not in that time frame." Hyun felt a cold sensation in his chest. Evolution didn't work this fast. Even the Veltari, who considered themselves an old and advanced species, had taken millions of years to reach their current level of technology. For a primitive species to jump from stone tools to orbital structures in just 500,000 years was unheard of. Could another species have colonized the planet? Jiwon suggested. Maybe the humans died out and someone else moved in. Possible, Mirai said, though she didn't sound convinced. "I'm scanning for life signs now." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Hyun watched the blue planet slowly rotate on the screen. From this distance, it looked beautiful and peaceful. White clouds swirled over blue oceans. Green and brown land masses stretched across the surface. It looked like a living world full of life and possibility. "Life signs confirmed," Mirai said after several minutes. "Billions of them. The planet is heavily populated. And sir, I'm detecting settlements on the moon as well. And on Mars. And on several asteroids in the inner system." Hyun felt his skin prickle with unease. This was not what they had expected to find. Not at all. "Send a standard greeting message," he ordered. "Let's see if anyone responds." Jiwon worked at her console, preparing the message. It was a simple transmission in the common language that most spacefaring species used. A basic introduction, a statement of peaceful intentions, and a request for communication. The message was sent. Then they waited. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 5. "Maybe they don't have the technology to receive it," Jiwon said. "Or maybe they don't understand the language." Before Hyun could respond, the communication system beeped. A message was coming in, but it wasn't in the common language. It was in perfect Veltari. "Greetings, travelers from the Veltari Collective," the message began. The voice was strange, neither male nor female, but pleasant and calm. "We have been waiting for you. Welcome back to Earth." The bridge went completely silent. Every member of the crew stared at the communication console as if it might explode. "They speak our language," Mirai whispered. "How do they speak our language?" "Play it again," Hyun commanded, the message repeated. The same calm voice, the same perfect Veltari words. And those final words that made no sense at all. "Welcome back to Earth." "They know we've been here before," Jiwon said. Her voice had gone flat, the way it did when she was deeply disturbed by something. But that was 500,000 years ago. How could they possibly know that? Hyun had no answer. His mind was racing through possibilities, none of them making sense. Had the humans kept records from that long ago? That seemed impossible for a primitive species. Had they found some artifact left behind by the Veltari survey team? Maybe, but that still didn't explain how they had learned the language. Another message came through. This time it included a visual feed. The screen showed a figure standing in what looked like a large white room. The figure was tall and stood on 2 legs. It had 2 arms, 2 eyes, and skin that was a light brown color. It was human. "I am Ambassador Taeyang," the figure said in perfect Veltari. He smiled, showing white teeth. "On behalf of humanity, I welcome you to our star system. We would be honored if you would dock at Haven's Gate, our primary orbital station. Coordinates are being transmitted now." The message ended. The screen went dark. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Hyun could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. The primitive apes they had catalogued 500,000 years ago were now greeting them in orbit, speaking their language, inviting them to an orbital station. "This is impossible," Jiwon said finally. "Evolution doesn't work this fast. Species don't advance this quickly. There has to be an explanation." "Maybe they had help," Mirai suggested. "Maybe another species uplifted them after we left. Or maybe we're wrong about how evolution works," Hyun said quietly. He was staring at the spot where the human's face had been on the screen. The creature had looked almost friendly, with its strange smile and its calm eyes. But there was something else there too. Something Hyun couldn't quite identify. A kind of confidence, perhaps, or knowledge. "Sir, what are your orders?" Jiwon asked. Hyun thought carefully. They could run, turn the ship around and head back to Veltari space as fast as their engines could carry them. Report what they had found and let someone else deal with it. That would be the safe choice. But Hyun had not become a commander by making safe choices. He had become a commander by being curious, by seeking out mysteries and solving them. And this was the greatest mystery he had ever encountered. "Accept their invitation," he said. "Set course for Haven's Gate, but keep all defensive systems active." "I want to be ready for anything." "Yes, Commander," Jiwon said. She returned to her station and began plotting the course. As the ship turned toward the coordinates the humans had provided, Hyun watched the planet below. Somewhere down there, the primitive creatures his people had dismissed as unimportant had built a civilization. They had learned to speak languages they should never have known. They had reached for the stars, and they had been waiting. That last thought bothered him most of all. They had been waiting, as if they had known the Veltari would return. As if they had been expecting this visit. Hyun didn't believe in coincidences, and he was starting to think that coming back to Earth might have been a terrible mistake. The transport ship descended through Earth's atmosphere with barely a whisper. Hyun watched through the window as they dropped below the clouds and the surface came into view. What he saw took his breath away. Earth was beautiful, more beautiful than the records from 500,000 years ago had suggested. Vast forests covered the land, their leaves shimmering in shades of green. Rivers wound through valleys like silver ribbons. Mountains rose toward the sky, their peaks white with snow. The air was clear and clean, free of the pollution that marked so many industrial worlds. "It looks almost untouched," Mirai said from beside him. She had her scanner out, taking readings constantly. "The atmosphere is cleaner than our homeworld. The oceans are full of life. I'm reading thousands of species of plants and animals. Where are the cities?" Jiwon asked. She stood near the pilot's seat, watching the landscape below with suspicion. A species this advanced should have massive urban centers, factories, infrastructure. "They're below," said Dae-hyun, the human who had been assigned as their guide. He was younger than Taeyang, or at least he looked younger. With humans, Hyun could no longer trust appearances. Dae-hyun might be 1,000 years old for all he knew. "Below?" Hyun repeated. "We moved underground about 100,000 years ago," Dae-hyun explained. "We wanted to return the surface to nature. It seemed wrong to cover this beautiful planet with concrete and steel when we could build downward instead." The ship landed on a platform built into the side of a mountain. As they exited, Hyun breathed in the fresh air. It smelled of pine trees and flowers, scents that reminded him of his own homeworld. Birds sang in the distance. A small animal that looked like a furry rodent scurried across the rocks nearby. "Follow me," Dae-hyun said, leading them to a large door built into the mountainside. The door was made of some smooth material that Hyun didn't recognize. When they approached, it slid open silently. Beyond the door was an elevator shaft that descended into darkness. They stepped inside and the elevator began to drop. Down and down and down. Hyun watched the display showing their depth. 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, 3. Still they descended. Finally, after dropping nearly 5 kilometers, the elevator stopped. The doors opened. Hyun stepped out and froze. They were standing on a platform overlooking an underground city that stretched as far as he could see. Buildings rose from the cavern floor, elegant towers of glass and metal that glowed with soft light. Streets wound between them, filled with humans going about their daily lives. Gardens grew everywhere, plants thriving under artificial lights that mimicked the sun. Water flowed through channels and fountains, creating a constant pleasant sound. But it was the size that truly stunned him. The cavern was enormous. The ceiling arched overhead like the sky itself, so far away that it was lost in haze. The city below must have held millions of people, maybe tens of millions. This is New Seoul, Daehyun said proudly, one of our larger underground cities. We have 342 cities like this around the world. 342, Mirai whispered. She was staring at her scanner and her face had gone pale. Commander, if each city holds even 10 million people, that's over 3 trillion inhabitants. That's impossible. Earth can't support that many people. Oh, that's just Earth, Daehyun said casually. The total human population across the solar system is closer to 400 billion. Hyun felt dizzy. 400 billion. That was more than the entire Veltari collective spread across dozens of worlds had produced in millions of years. How? Jiwon demanded. How do you feed that many people? Where do you get the resources? Efficient recycling, Daehyun said. And we don't need as much as you might think. Many of our people don't live in physical bodies anymore. What does that mean? Hyun asked, though he was starting to fear the answer. Let me show you, Daehyun said. We're meeting someone who can explain it better than I can. They took a transport through the city. It moved on magnetic rails, fast and smooth. Humans filled the streets below, all of them looking young and healthy. They wore colorful clothes and seemed happy, talking and laughing with each other. Children were visible now, playing in parks and attending schools. But even the children looked somehow wrong to Hyun's eyes. Too perfect, too healthy. The transport stopped at a large building near the center of the city. Inside, they were led to a vast room filled with strange equipment. Cylinders lined the walls, each one glowing with a soft blue light. In the center of the room stood a woman with short gray hair. She was the first human Hyun had seen who looked truly old. I am Youngji, the woman said in Veltari. Her voice was strong despite her aged appearance. I direct the continuity archives. Welcome to the heart of human civilization. What is this place? Mirai asked, walking toward one of the glowing cylinders. What are these machines? Backup systems, Youngji said simply. Every human's consciousness is recorded here, updated continuously. If someone dies, they can be restored from their latest backup. Death has become merely an inconvenience. Hyun felt his blood turn cold. You copy minds? Digitally. Not just copy, Youngji corrected. We integrate. The human mind and digital substrate have become one. Some of us still maintain biological bodies, like me. I'm old-fashioned that way. But most prefer to exist partially or fully in digital form. It's more efficient. Efficient, Jiwon said. The word sounded bitter coming from her. You've turned yourselves into machines. We've transcended the limitations of flesh, Youngji said. There was no anger in her voice, just patient explanation. Disease doesn't touch us. Age is optional. We can think faster, remember more, experience things that biological minds cannot comprehend. We've become more than we were. Or less, Mirai muttered. Youngji smiled sadly. Perhaps. That's a question each species must answer for themselves. She led them deeper into the facility. They passed rooms filled with more equipment, computers running calculations at speeds that made Hyun's head spin. Technicians worked at consoles, monitoring systems that controlled billions of digital consciousnesses. We've been expanding this system for 200,000 years, Youngji explained. Every human who has lived since then exists in our database. Even those who died before we developed the technology have been reconstructed from DNA samples and historical records. Everyone gets to live forever. That's not living, Hyun said. That's just existing. Is there a difference? Youngji asked. She seemed genuinely curious. We feel, we think. We love and fear and hope. We create art and music and poetry. What more is needed to be alive? They returned to the surface as the sun was setting. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink. It should have been beautiful, but Hyun felt only horror. Daehyun took them to meet one more person before they returned to the station. An old man named Kyung, who lived in a small house on the mountainside. Kyung was truly old, his face lined with wrinkles, his hands shaking slightly as he poured them tea. I'm one of the last, Kyung said. One of the few who remember what it was like when death was final. When every day mattered because there were only so many days. Why didn't you join them? Hyun asked. Why stay biological when you could be immortal? Kyung looked out the window at the sunset. Because there's beauty in endings. Because knowing something will end makes it precious. My grandfather taught me that. He died before the technology existed to save him. Really died, gone forever. And I miss him every day. But that missing means something. It means he mattered. The others don't understand that anymore, Kyung continued. They can't. When you can live forever, when you can reload yourself if something goes wrong, nothing has weight. Nothing truly matters. Then why do they keep expanding? Ji-won asked. Why build all of this if nothing matters? Because they're afraid, Kyung said softly. Afraid that if they stop growing, if they stop building and creating and expanding, they'll realize that they've lost something important. Something they can never get back. As they flew back to Haven's Gate that night, Hyun sat in silence. His mind kept returning to those glowing cylinders, each one containing billions of human consciousnesses, all those people living forever in digital dreams. Commander, Mirai said quietly, I did some calculations. At their current population and rate of expansion, humans will need the resources of every planet in the solar system within 10,000 years, and that's just to maintain their existence. What happens when they run out of resources here? Ji-won asked, though she already knew the answer. They expand, Hyun said, to other systems, other worlds. They're like a virus, Ji-won said, growing and consuming everything they touch. No, Mirai corrected. Viruses aren't aware of what they do. Humans are. They know exactly what they're doing. And they're doing it anyway. Hyun looked down at Earth as they climbed back toward orbit. The planet was dark now, lit only by the glow of billions of lights from the cities below, both on the surface and beneath it. And around it, in orbit, the stations and satellites formed rings of light. It was beautiful and terrible all at once. Humanity had conquered death and spread across their world like nothing Hyun had ever seen. And somewhere in the darkness, Kyung's words echoed in his mind. They're afraid that if they stop, they'll realize they've lost something important. 2 years passed like water flowing over stones, steady, constant, changing everything gradually. Daeho stood in his quarters on graduation morning, adjusting his new ensign's uniform in the mirror. The rank insignia on his collar felt heavier than it should, but in a good way, a reminder of responsibility rather than burden. The room looked different now. Where once his walls had been bare, now they held photos. One of his mother in her captain's uniform. Another of the Morning Hope crew taken at some long-ago gathering, everyone smiling. A picture of him and Minho at the academy gates on their first day, both looking nervous and young. He had stopped hiding. The metal box that once lived under his mattress now sat openly on his desk. The scorched captain's insignia inside had been cleaned and mounted in a small frame. It was no longer a secret to carry alone, but a memory to honor. Hey, you ready? Minho burst through the door wearing his own new uniform, grinning widely. Graduation starts in an hour, and I need to make sure you're not having some kind of emotional crisis up here. I'm fine, Daeho said, but he was smiling. Nervous, but fine. Good nervous or bad nervous? Good, I think. Daeho turned from the mirror. It's strange. 2 years ago, I didn't want anyone to know who I was. Now I'm about to graduate and everyone knows my story. That was true. After his speech at the Remembrance Assembly, everything had changed. Not dramatically or suddenly, but gradually. Other cadets had approached him to share their own losses and stories. Instructors had treated him with new respect. The Broken Gate footage was still studied, but now it was taught differently. Not as a tactical puzzle, but as a lesson in sacrifice and choice. Your speech changed things, Minho said seriously. People needed to hear that, to remember that soldiers are people first. I just told the truth. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do. Minho checked his chrono. Come on, we've got to get down to the assembly hall. And you have something to do first. What? You'll see. They walked through the academy corridors one last time as cadets. The building felt different knowing they were leaving. Smaller somehow, like they had outgrown it. Other graduates moved in groups laughing and taking photos. The energy was electric with excitement and nerves. Minho led him not to the assembly hall but to the memorial corridor. A crowd had gathered there, which was unusual. Instructors, cadets, even some high-ranking officers stood facing the wall where Broken Gate victims were listed. Velthar stood at the center. When he saw Daiho approaching, he gestured him forward. "Ensign Kim, thank you for coming. What's going on? 2 years ago you gave a speech that reminded us all why we serve. You put faces and names to history. Today the Academy dedicates a new memorial to honor that lesson. We asked you to be here because it would not exist without your courage in speaking." The crowd parted. Where once there had been just lists of names, now there was a new installation. A holographic display showing footage and photos from the Battle of Broken Gate, but different from the usual tactical feeds. These were personal photos, crew members in casual clothes, groups laughing together, people at work, at rest, being human. And below the display, new plaques with brief descriptions of each person, not just ranks and names, but details about who they were. Captain Yoonji Kim, loved navigation and terrible coffee, sang to her son every night. Taeyang Choi, ship's cook, known for his dumplings and terrible jokes. First Officer Jiwon Park, kept crew morale high with old Earth songs. Daeho felt his throat tighten. They were real here. Not just names on a wall, but people with personalities and quirks and lives. "We realized," Velthar said quietly, "that we had been honoring the sacrifice, but forgetting the people. You reminded us that every name represents someone who mattered to someone else. This memorial reflects that." "Thank you," Daeho managed. She would have liked this. They all would have. "There's one more thing." Velthar handed him a small ceremonial torch. "At today's graduation ceremony, we're adding a new tradition. The lighting of the memorial flame. It will burn continuously as a reminder that every graduate carries forward the legacy of those who came before. We'd like you to light it." Daeho held the torch carefully. "I'd be honored." The graduation ceremony was held in the main auditorium, the same place where Daiho had given his speech 2 years before. The space was filled with graduates, families, and distinguished guests from across the coalition. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation and pride. Daiho sat with the other human graduates, Minho on one side and Hana on the other. Quill waved from a few rows over. Even Vorn, the Trilaxian who once called humans recklessly emotional, gave him a respectful nod. The ceremony proceeded with speeches and honors. Awards were given. Names were called. When Daiho walked across the stage to receive his commission as an ensign, the applause was warm and genuine. He was no longer the quiet cadet hiding in corners. He was someone who had found his voice. But the most significant moment came at the end. A new memorial structure had been erected in the Academy's central plaza, the eternal flame surrounded by stone walls engraved with names from all coalition conflicts. It would burn continuously, a reminder of sacrifice and service. "We invite Ensign Daeho Kim," the commandant announced, survivor of Broken Gate and son of Captain Yoonji Kim, to light the first flame. Daeho walked to the memorial with steady steps. The torch in his hand felt warm. The entire academy watched in silence as he approached the central brazier. He thought about his mother as he reached forward. About Taeyang and Jiwon and everyone else who stayed behind. About the 40,000 people who lived because they died. About carrying their memory not as guilt but as inspiration. The torch touched the brazier and flame erupted bright and strong. It reflected off the engraved names, making them seem to glow. Daeho stepped back and saluted. Behind him, every graduate, instructor, and officer did the same. They stood together, united across species and culture, honoring those who gave everything. Later, after the formal ceremony ended and celebrations began, Daeho found a quiet moment alone at the memorial. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a data chip, the one that held his mother's personal logs and family videos. He had carried it for 15 years. Carefully, he placed it in a small compartment at the memorial's base, designed for such offerings. He didn't need it anymore. The memories weren't trapped in a chip or a box. They lived in him, in how he lived his life, in the choices he made. "I made it, Mom," he said quietly. "I graduated. I'm going to serve on the Coalition Vanguard, deep space exploration. You would have loved that assignment." The flame flickered but burned steady. Minho found him there. "Hey, they're taking group photos. You coming?" "Yeah." Daeho turned from the memorial, but not with sadness. "With peace. I'm coming." They walked back toward the celebrations together. The plaza was filled with graduates and families, everyone taking photos and sharing congratulations. Daeho saw Velthar speaking with a group of new instructors. probably already planning next year's curriculum. Quill was juggling data pads while trying to take a selfie. Thorn was demonstrating some Trilaxian celebration ritual that involved a lot of arm waving. "What do you think?" Minyo asked. "Ready for the next adventure?" Daiho thought about the Coalition vanguard waiting at dock, about exploring unknown space, about serving alongside his friends, about living the life his mother had given him, not with guilt but with gratitude and purpose. "Yeah," he said. "I'm ready." 3 weeks later, Daiho reported for duty aboard the Coalition vanguard. The ship was massive and beautiful, designed for long-range exploration and science missions. His quarters were small but comfortable, and he decorated them with a few important items. A photo of his mother, a replica of the Morning Hope, the framed insignia. Minho had the quarters next door and immediately complained about the sound insulation. "I can hear you walking around at night. You still don't sleep much, do you?" "Working on it," Daiho replied. Letters had started arriving after his speech. At first just a few, then dozens, then hundreds. People from across the galaxy writing to share their own stories. Some were survivors like him. Others had lost people in the wars. Many were just ordinary civilians who wanted to say thank you for reminding them that sacrifice meant something. One letter stood out. It came from a woman named Sora Lee, written on actual paper and delivered through official channels. "Dear Daiho," it read, "I don't know if you remember me. We've never met. But 15 years ago I was evacuated from the colony worlds. I was 7 years old. I was on one of the ships your mother protected." The letter continued. Sora had grown up, become an engineer, gotten married. She now worked designing better emergency systems for colony ships. Because of Captain Kim and the others, 40,000 people got to live their lives. I got to live mine. I have 2 daughters now. We named one Yunji after your mother. I wanted you to know that her sacrifice didn't end with saving us that day. It ripples forward through every life we touch, every child we raise, every person we help. Daiho read that letter 3 times, then carefully stored it with his other important possessions. Sora was right. The sacrifice at Broken Gate hadn't ended when the ships exploded. It continued in every person who lived because they died, in the families those people built, in the work they did, in the kindness they showed others. 3 days after visiting Earth's surface, Hyun received an invitation to meet with the Expansion Council. He didn't like the name. It suggested that humanity's growth was organized, deliberate, and ongoing. But he accepted anyway. They needed to understand what humanity had become, and this council might provide answers. The meeting took place in a chamber deep within Haven's Gate. The room was circular, with a domed ceiling that displayed a map of the galaxy. Stars glittered above them, and Hyun could see glowing lines connecting some of them. He had a sick feeling he knew what those lines represented. A man entered the room. He was tall and thin, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to look through rather than at people. He wore a simple black uniform with no decorations. "I am Seojin," he said, bowing slightly. "I serve on the Expansion Council. Thank you for meeting with me, Commander Hyun." "Thank you for the invitation," Hyun replied carefully. "Though I'm curious why a species that claims to be peaceful needs an expansion council." Seojin smiled. It was not a warm expression. "We don't expand through conquest if that's what worries you. We expand because we must. Let me show you why." He gestured to the star map above them. The view zoomed in, focusing on their solar system. Hyun could see Earth and its neighboring planets all connected by those glowing lines. Ships moved between them constantly, tiny dots of light carrying cargo and people. "This is our current territory," Seojun explained. "We control everything within this system. We mine asteroids for metals and minerals. We harvest helium from gas giants. We convert matter into computational substrate at an ever-increasing rate, and still it's not enough." "Not enough for what?" Mirai asked. She had accompanied Hyun to the meeting along with Jiwon. "To maintain our civilization," Seojin said. 400 billion consciousnesses require enormous amounts of energy and matter to sustain. Every year that number grows, not through birth as you might think, but through expansion of existing minds. People create copies of themselves to explore different lives. They fork into multiple versions. A single person can become 100 over time. "That's madness," Jiwon said bluntly. "That's immortality," Seojun corrected. "When you have forever, you want to experience everything."
Be everything.
One lifetime, even an endless one, isn't enough when you can split yourself and live multiple lives simultaneously. The star map zoomed out further. Now Hyun could see the lines extending beyond the solar system, reaching toward other stars. There were dozens of them. No, hundreds. These are our probe destinations, Seojin explained. We've sent automated vessels to 30,000 star systems so far. They're von Neumann machines, self-replicating. When they arrive at a system, they'll begin converting matter into computational substrate, building new homes for human consciousness. You're converting entire solar systems into computers? Mirai's voice rose in horror. What about life that might already exist there? We scan first, Seojin said. If we detect intelligent life, we make contact. We offer them what we've found. The gift of immortality, the chance to transcend their biological limitations. And if they refuse? Hyun asked, though he was afraid of the answer. Seojin's expression didn't change. Then we move on to the next system. We're not conquerors, Commander. We don't destroy. We simply grow. A door opened and another person entered. But this one was different. Hyun couldn't quite explain how he knew, but there was something about the way they moved. Too smooth, too perfect, like watching a computer animation rather than a real person. This is Hana, Seojin said. She exists primarily in digital form. The body you see is just a shell she's inhabiting for this meeting. Greetings, Hana said. Her voice had a strange quality, like multiple voices speaking in perfect harmony. I wanted to meet you. We don't often get visitors from other species. How many of humanity is like you? Jiwon asked. Fully digital? About 60%, Hana replied. The rest maintain biological bodies as their primary form, though most can transfer to digital substrate when needed. It's very convenient. I can be in multiple places at once. Right now I'm having this conversation with you while also attending a concert on Mars, studying physics at an orbital university, and exploring the oceans of Europa. That's not natural, Mirai said. Natural is a limitation we chose to overcome, Hana said gently. Why experience one thing at a time when you can experience everything simultaneously? A third person entered the room. This one looked older, though Hyun no longer trusted that appearance meant anything with humans. He had gray hair and wore the clothes of a scholar. I am Minho, the man said. I'm a historian. Seojun asked me to provide context for our visitors. He thought you might want to understand how we reached this point. Please, Hyun said. He needed to understand. The more he learned about humanity, the less sense it made. Minho sat down and began to speak. His voice was soft but clear, the voice of someone who had told this story many times. We nearly destroyed ourselves, he began. About 250,000 years ago, we developed nuclear weapons. We came within hours of wiping out our entire species. Only luck and a few brave individuals prevented total annihilation. That experience changed us. We realized we needed to work together or die. So we united. We set aside our differences and focused on survival, and we thrived. But then we faced a new problem. Our population grew faster than our resources. We were destroying our planet through overconsumption. We faced another extinction event, this one of our own making. That's when we discovered how to digitize consciousness. It was supposed to be a backup system, a way to preserve people who were dying. But we quickly realized it could be so much more. If people could exist digitally, they didn't need to eat or drink. They didn't take up physical space. They could be sustained with just energy. It seemed like the perfect solution, Minho continued. His expression grew sad. And in many ways it was. Within a few thousand years, 99% of humanity had been digitized. The population that had been destroying Earth was now living in computer servers that took up a tiny fraction of the space and resources. But there was a cost, Minho said quietly. The wars we fought during the transition were terrible. Those who wanted to remain biological fought against those who wanted to digitize everyone. Billions died. Real death before we had the backup systems fully operational. The old Earth, the one your ancestors visited, was completely destroyed in those wars. We rebuilt, Minho said. We brought back the animals and plants from genetic samples. We cleaned the oceans and air. We made Earth beautiful again. But we couldn't bring back those who died. They were gone forever, and the survivors carried that guilt. That's why we expand, Minho finished. We tell ourselves it's about growth and progress. But really, we're running from what we did. From the billions we lost, we think if we can spread human consciousness across the galaxy, if we can make sure we never face extinction again, then maybe those deaths will have meant something. The room fell silent. Hyun tried to process everything he'd heard. Humanity's entire history was a story of near extinction and desperate survival. They had transformed themselves not out of ambition but out of fear. "Commander," Ji-won said quietly in Veltari, "we need to leave. Now. This species is dangerous." "I don't think they mean us harm," Hyun replied in the same language. "That's not what I mean," Ji-won said. "They don't need to attack us to be dangerous. They're expanding exponentially. Eventually they'll reach our space, and when they do, they'll offer us the same choice. Join them or be left behind." Hyun turned back to the humans. "How many species have you contacted before us?" Seojin and Minho exchanged glances. 6, Seojin admitted. "Over the past 50,000 years, our probes have encountered 6 other intelligent species." "And what happened to them?" Hyun asked. 4 accepted integration," Seojin said. "They joined us, added their knowledge and culture to ours. They still exist, their minds preserved forever in our network. 2 refused. We left them alone and moved our expansion in other directions." "Show me," Hyun demanded. "Show me these other species." Hana stepped forward. Her eyes changed, the pupils becoming screens that displayed images. Hyun saw alien faces, strange and beautiful, creatures unlike anything in Veltari space, and all of them had the same look in their eyes. That perfect, ageless digital quality. "They're not individuals anymore," Murray whispered. "They've been absorbed into the human collective." "We prefer the term integrated," Hana said. "They maintain their identities and cultures. They're still themselves, just better." "Better," Ji-won repeated. "Or less." Before anyone could answer, an alarm began to sound. Seojun quickly checked a device on his wrist. "What's happening?" Hyun demanded. "Nothing to worry about," Seojun said, but his expression suggested otherwise. "One of our probes has just entered your home system. It will begin its standard survey. We wanted to learn more about your species to prepare for cultural exchange." Hyun felt ice flood his veins. "You send a probe to our homeworld?" "Just to observe," Seojun said quickly. "We mean no harm. It's standard procedure when we meet a new species. We like to understand who we're dealing with." Haven's Gate grew larger as the Veltari ship approached. At first it had been just a point of light among the stars. Then it became a shape. And finally, as they drew closer, it revealed itself as something that made Hyun's breath catch in his throat. The station was enormous. It stretched across space like a giant wheel, spinning slowly to create artificial gravity. Lights glowed from thousands of windows along its surface. Ships moved in and out of docking bays, coming and going with an efficiency that spoke of centuries of practice. Solar panels spread out like wings, drinking in the light from the sun. "The station is approximately 40 kilometers in diameter," Mireille reported from her console. Her voice was quiet, almost reverent. "I'm detecting living space for at least 2 million inhabitants." "Maybe more." 2 million, Ji-won repeated. "In orbit. They have 2 million people living in space." "That's just this station," Mireille added. "I'm counting 17 other major structures in Earth orbit. And that's not including the settlements on the Moon and Mars." Hyun said nothing. He was too busy trying to comprehend what his species had missed. The Veltari had been exploring space for millions of years. They had built stations and colonies across hundreds of worlds. But this, what humanity had accomplished in a fraction of that time, seemed impossible. "We're being hailed," Ji-won announced. "They're sending docking instructions." "Follow them," Hyun ordered. "And Ji-won, I want you and a security team ready. Full armor, full weapons. I don't think they mean us harm, but we need to be prepared." "Understood, sir." The ship glided into one of Haven's Gate's docking bays. Through the viewing screen, Hyun could see the interior of the bay. It was clean and bright, with smooth metal walls and clear markings showing where ships should land. Robotic arms extended to help guide them into position. Everything moved with practiced precision. When the ship had settled and the airlocks had sealed, Hyun made his way to the exit ramp. Ji-won and 3 security officers followed him, their weapons visible but not aimed. Mireille came too, carrying scanning equipment to record everything they encountered. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Beyond it was a corridor, well lit and comfortable. And waiting in the corridor were 3 humans. The one in front stepped forward, arms spread in a gesture that seemed meant to show he was unarmed. He was the same one from the video message, Ambassador Tae-young. He was tall for a human, with black hair and dark eyes that watched the Veltari with obvious interest. "Welcome to Haven's Gate," Tae-young said in perfect Veltari. His mouth moved strangely to form the words, but the pronunciation was flawless. I hope your journey was comfortable. Hyun studied the human carefully. Taeyang wore simple clothes, a gray uniform that seemed to be standard for the station. He looked young, perhaps the equivalent of a Veltari in their third decade of life. But there was something in his eyes that suggested much more age and experience. Thank you for your hospitality. Hyun replied in Veltari, then switched to the common language. Do you speak the trade language as well? Of course, Taeyang said, switching languages smoothly. We speak many languages, but we thought you might be more comfortable in your own tongue. We've studied your people extensively. That statement sent a chill through Hyun. You've studied us. How Taeyang smiled. It was a friendly expression, but it made Hyun uncomfortable in a way he couldn't quite explain. You left things behind during your last visit, equipment, records, a crashed probe on our moon. We found them about 300,000 years ago and learned a great deal. 300,000 years, Mireille whispered. You've had our technology for that long? Oh, we didn't copy your technology, Taeyang said quickly. That would be rude. We simply studied it to understand how you think, how you communicate. We wanted to be ready when you returned. You expected us to return? Hyun asked. Of course. Your survey records showed you mark planets for future visits. We assumed you would come back eventually to check on our progress. The human gestured down the corridor. Please come. Let me show you our station. We've prepared quarters for you and there's so much we'd like to share. As they walked through Haven's Gate, Hyun found himself increasingly disturbed by what he saw. The station was beautiful. The corridors were wide and clean. Plants grew in gardens built into the walls, providing oxygen and food. Humans moved past them with casual confidence, barely glancing at the alien visitors. Some nodded politely. Others smiled, but there was something wrong. Something Hyun couldn't quite identify at first. Then Mireille leaned close to him and whispered, Commander, I haven't seen any children, or any elderly. Everyone here looks the same age. She was right. Every human they passed looked young and healthy. Not a single child running through the corridors. Not a single gray-haired elder moving slowly with age. They all looked to be in their physical prime. Ambassador, Hyun said carefully, I notice everyone here seems to be young adults. Where are the children? The elderly? Taeyang glanced back at him and for just a moment something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been sadness, or perhaps it was something else entirely. We don't have children in the traditional sense anymore, Taeyang said. And as for elderly, well, I am elderly. I'm 847 years old. The Veltari group stopped walking. Hyun stared at the human who looked no older than 30. That's impossible, Jawan said flatly. No biological creature lives that long without aging. We found a way, Taeyang said simply. About 200,000 years ago, we solved the mortality problem. They continued walking, but Hyun's mind was racing. Immortality. The humans had conquered death itself. That explained why everyone looked the same age. They had stopped aging. But something about that thought filled him with an inexplicable dread. Taeyang led them to a large observation deck. One entire wall was made of transparent material, looking out into space. Earth hung below them, beautiful and blue. The sun blazed in the distance. And everywhere Hyun looked, there were structures. Stations, satellites, ships moving between them like schools of fish. This is humanity's home system, Taeyang said proudly. We've spread throughout it. There are settlements on every major body, mining operations in the asteroid belt, research stations around every planet. A woman stepped forward from where she had been standing by the window. She was shorter than Taeyang, with long black hair tied back in a practical style. She wore a white coat that marked her as some kind of scientist. I am Dr. Sumin, she said. I'm a physicist. I help maintain the station systems. It's an honor to meet another spacefaring species. Your technology is impressive, Mireille admitted. Far more advanced than we expected. Thank you, Soman said. We've worked hard to develop it. Though I must admit, our physics is quite different from yours. We took a different path. Different how? Mireille asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. You use what we call conventional physics, Soman explained. Fusion drives, particle shields, quantum communication. We developed those too, initially. But then we discovered other methods. More efficient ways to manipulate space-time and energy. A man in a black uniform approached them. He was stocky and muscular with a scar across his cheek that looked old and faded. I am Jinwoo, he said. security officer for this sector of the station. If you need anything during your stay, please let me know. Thank you, Hyun said. He noticed that Jinwoo's uniform had no visible weapons, but the man moved like a trained fighter. There was a coiled readiness in his stance that reminded Hyun of Jiwon. We've prepared a meal for you, Taeyang said. If you're hungry, we've studied your biology and created food that should be compatible with your systems. They followed Taeyang to a dining area. It was elegant and comfortable, with tables and chairs sized appropriately for Veltari bodies. Food was laid out on the tables, dishes that looked and smelled similar to Veltari cuisine. As they ate, Taeyang talked about humanity's history. He spoke of their early struggles, their wars and conflicts. He described how they had nearly destroyed themselves several times before learning to work together. He talked about their first ventures into space, their colonies on the Moon and Mars, but there were gaps in his story, things he didn't mention, and Hyun noticed that whenever Mirai asked about population numbers or resource consumption, Taeyang's answers became vague. After the meal, as they were being shown to their quarters, Hyun pulled Jiwon aside. Something is wrong here, he said quietly in the Veltari language, hoping the humans couldn't understand even though they seemed to understand everything. I agree, Jiwon said. This is all too perfect, too polished. They're hiding something. We need to be careful, Hyun said, and we need to find out what they're not telling us. Jiwon nodded. I'll have the security team run detailed scans tonight. Whatever they're hiding, we'll find it. But as Hyun lay in his quarters that night, unable to sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had made a terrible mistake in coming here. The humans were friendly, yes. They were welcoming and hospitable. But there was something beneath that surface, something vast and strange and perhaps terrible, and he was beginning to fear that by the time they discovered what it would be too late to leave.